It's strange, isn't it, how something can hurt you and still pull you closer. You'd think pain would be a warning, a clear signal to stay away, but sometimes it feels like the very thing that breaks you also calls your name. You tell yourself you're done, that you've learned your lesson, that you won't go back. And yet, when the silence stretches too long or a familiar song starts playing, something inside of you aches to reach out. Not because you've forgotten the pain, but because you miss the feeling of being seen, even if it was only for a moment. I've been there too, that place where logic dies and longing takes over, where you start mistaking absence for meaning and pain for proof that something mattered. It's not that you enjoy suffering, it's that deep down part of you has learned to equate it with love. That's the cruelest trick of all, the way our past teaches our hearts to crave what once hurt us. When you fall for someone who wounds you, it doesn't happen because you're foolish or weak. It happens because they touch something ancient inside of you, something unresolved, something still waiting to be healed. They remind you of the parent who wasn't there when you needed them most, or the affection you had to earn by being quiet, pleasing, small. You don't recognize it at first, because the pattern wears a new face, a different smile. But your body remembers. It remembers the uncertainty, the tension, the desperate hope that maybe this time, if you love harder, it will finally be enough. That's the cruel paradox. We're drawn to the people who mirror the wounds we've never named, the ones who disappear when we reach out, who love in doses, who offer warmth only after making us cold. They feel like home, not because they're right for us, but because they feel familiar, and familiarity, no matter how painful, feels safer than peace. Peace feels foreign when your nervous system was built in chaos. I used to think love was supposed to feel intense, like fire, like madness, like something that consumes. If it didn't make my heart race or my stomach twist, I thought it wasn't real. But that wasn't love. That was anxiety dressed as connection. It was my body reacting to danger and mistaking it for passion. When someone treated me gently, consistently, I'd grow restless. I'd say, "It's too calm," as if calmness were a flaw. But now I see that's not boredom, that's healing. It just doesn't feel familiar yet. You probably know that feeling too, the pull toward what you know is wrong. You tell yourself it'll be different this time. You promise you'll set boundaries, that you'll stay detached. But then they smile, or send a message, or look at you the way they used to, and suddenly you're back where you swore you'd never return. It's not that you want to suffer, it's that on some level the chaos feels like home. And maybe home, for you, was a place where love always came with pain. There's a moment, maybe you've felt it, when you stand at the edge of that familiar cliff. The wind hits your face, your mind screams, "Turn back," but something deeper, almost primal, urges you forward. It's not courage, it's compulsion. It's the ancient part of you that still believes, if I just jump one more time, maybe this time I'll fly. But you don't. You fall again and again until you start to wonder if the fall itself has become your comfort. It's not your fault. No one teaches us how to break emotional patterns. We grow up on stories where love is tragedy, where pain makes it meaningful. Fairy tales disguised suffering as devotion. The prince fights, the princess waits, the monster changes for love. No one told us that real love doesn't need to hurt to be real. That peace can be passionate, that safety can be thrilling. You're not addicted to them. Not really. You're addicted to the feeling of being seen by someone who also makes you disappear. You're chasing the illusion of closure, trying to heal your oldest wound through someone who keeps reopening it. It's not love you're craving, it's resolution. You want the story to end differently this time, but it never does it? Sometimes I think of it like this. They are the mirror, and you are the reflection searching for yourself in them. You're drawn to them because they show you the parts of yourself you've ignored, the anger, the longing, the need. They bring your shadow to the surface, and though it's painful, it's also magnetic. Because for a moment you see yourself. Even if it's distorted, you can't fight that pull by hating it. You can only outgrow it by seeing it for what it is. You're not weak for wanting them. You're human. You're repeating a lesson your soul is still trying to learn. The point isn't to stop loving. It's to start recognizing when love has turned into self-abandonment. Maybe one day you'll stand on that same cliff again and you'll feel the wind, the same pull, the same ache. But this time, you won't jump. You'll just stand there and look down, realizing that the fall was never necessary. The lesson was never about holding on. It was about learning when to let go. And maybe then, for the first time, you'll understand. It wasn't them you were chasing all along. It was the part of you that still believed love had to hurt to be real. And once you see that clearly, the spell starts to break. Do you ever wonder when all of it started? Not the relationship itself, but the pattern underneath it. That quiet, invisible rhythm that keeps pulling you back into the same kind of story with different faces. I used to think it began with the first heartbreak, but it goes much further back. It starts in the small, unspoken moments of childhood, when you first learned that love was something you had to earn. Maybe it was the silence after you cried and no one came. Maybe it was the praise you got only when you behaved, or the coldness that fell over the room when you disappointed someone. Those things stay inside you. They don't leave when you grow up. They just change shape. The child who once reached for a parent's love and got distance instead learns to reach for partners who offer the same. Distance disguised as passion. You don't choose them consciously. You're simply drawn to what feels familiar, and unfortunately, pain can feel familiar. The thing is, our bodies remember before our minds do. So when you meet someone whose love feels unpredictable, whose presence feels earned rather than given, something in you lights up. It's as if your nervous system says, "Ah, I know this feeling. This is what love is supposed to feel like." Even though it isn't love, it's survival. The same survival mechanism that once kept you safe as a child now traps you as an adult. You stay alert, you read the smallest shifts in tone. You adapt yourself again and again, all in the name of staying connected. And it's exhausting, isn't it? To keep proving that you're worth being loved. To keep hoping that one day they'll finally see you, stay with you, choose you. That's the most painful part, the hope. Because hope keeps you there long after love is gone. It's the echo of that little child who once thought, "If I just try harder, maybe they won't leave." But no one tells you that trying harder doesn't heal the wound. It deepens it. Every time you bend to fit someone else's comfort, you reinforce the belief that you're too much or not enough. Every time you silence yourself to keep the peace, you lose a piece of who you are. It's like living in a house that slowly shrinks around you until one day you can't breathe, and yet you still call it home. Sometimes I think that's why people confuse chaos with love, because calm feels foreign when your earliest lessons were about walking on eggshells. Stability feels boring, almost suspicious. You meet someone who treats you kindly, consistently, and instead of feeling safe, you feel restless. Your mind whispers, "Where's the spark? Where's the tension?" But that spark isn't love. It's your trauma being reactivated. It's your body recognizing a pattern and mistaking danger for intimacy. We like to believe that we choose who we love, but most of the time, it's our wounds that choose for us. They lead us back to what's unresolved, over and over, until we finally pay attention. It's as if the universe keeps saying, "You didn't heal this yet. Try again." Not as punishment, but as an invitation. Each heartbreak is a mirror, showing you what still aches inside. I remember when that truth first hit me. how many of my relationships weren't really about the other person at all. They were reenactments, attempts to win a kind of love I missed a long time ago. I wasn't in love with them. I was in love with the version of me I hoped they'd help me become, someone finally chosen, finally enough. It's hard to admit that, because it means facing the loneliness beneath the longing. It means acknowledging that sometimes what we call love is just our oldest wound asking to be seen. But there's something quietly beautiful in that realization too, because once you see it, you stop blaming yourself. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What happened to me?" And that shift, that simple shift, changes everything. You begin to see how love shaped your early world. The conditional affection, the withdrawal, the unspoken expectations. And you realize you've been repeating those dynamics, trying to rewrite the ending. You wanted the parent who left to finally stay, even if it's through the face of someone else. You wanted the voice that once said, "You're too much," to finally say, "You're just right." That's why it's so hard to let go. Because letting go feels like giving up on ever receiving that missing piece. But maybe healing isn't about getting it from someone else. Maybe it's about learning to give it to yourself. To say the words you've always wanted to hear. I see you. You matter. You don't have to fight to be loved. Because when you start saying them to yourself, something shifts deep inside. The child who's been waiting at the door finally steps inside. It's not a sudden transformation. It's slow, uncomfortable, sometimes even heartbreaking. You'll still crave the old patterns, still miss the chaos, still feel the urge to prove yourself. But now you'll know what's happening. You'll see the repetition for what it is, a memory playing itself out. And each time you notice it, you loosen its grip. That's the beginning of healing. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of understanding. It's when you can look at your patterns and say, "I know why I do this." And instead of judging yourself, you just hold that truth gently, because awareness is the doorway. And once you walk through it, you start to find something you might not have known you were missing all along: peace. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to fall into the role of the fixer? The one who loves harder, gives more, forgives faster. The one who stays, even when staying hurts. I used to think that made me strong, that enduring meant I was built for love. But it wasn't strength, it was fear disguised as loyalty. Fear of being abandoned, fear of being forgotten, fear that if I stopped trying to save someone, I'd lose my worth. You tell yourself you're different, that your love can heal what others couldn't, that if you just love them enough, they'll finally see their own light. And maybe, for a while, they do. You get glimpses of who they could be: soft, open, alive. But then they pull away again, retreat into their darkness, and suddenly you're left holding both your pain and theirs. You become the caretaker of someone else's wounds, while neglecting your own. It's such a seductive trap, isn't it? To believe you're the exception, to think that your love has the power to redeem. That's the archetype of the Redeemer, the Savior complex dressed as devotion. But underneath it all lies a silent plea. If I can save them, maybe I can save the broken parts of myself too. It's not really about them. It's about that unconscious hope that healing another person might heal the child inside you who was never rescued. And when it fails, because it always does, you don't blame them. You blame yourself. You think, maybe I didn't love them enough. Maybe if I had been more patient, more kind, less demanding. You forget that love was never meant to be a one-sided sacrifice. You forget that compassion without boundaries is not compassion. It's self-erasure. I used to wear that erasure like a medal. I thought enduring pain was noble. I thought suffering proved depth. But the truth is, I wasn't loving. I was performing worthiness. I kept playing the role of the martyr, the one who takes it all, forgives it all, and calls it love. Because somewhere along the line, I learned that to suffer was to matter, that to be loved, I had to prove I could survive the fire. But love isn't a battlefield, and you're not a warrior meant to bleed for it. Real love doesn't demand your self-destruction. It doesn't ask you to shrink to fit someone's comfort or silence your needs to preserve their peace. Love that costs you your self-respect isn't love. It's dependency. And the cruelest thing about it is that you call it sacrifice while it quietly eats away at your soul. You know what's strange? The moment you stop trying to save someone, you realize they never wanted saving in the first place. They wanted control. Your endless forgiveness, your relentless empathy. It kept them from facing their own reflection, because as long as you carried their guilt, they didn't have to. And yet, you stayed because walking away felt like failure, because you built your identity around being the one who doesn't give up. But staying isn't always loyalty. Sometimes it's fear of losing the story you've built around your pain. When you've spent years defining yourself through endurance, letting go feels like erasing who you are. But what if your strength isn't in how much you can carry, but in what you finally decide to put down? What if love doesn't mean saving anyone, not even yourself, but simply seeing things as they are, without illusion? That's what I'm learning. That love without clarity becomes self-deception, and self-deception is the most elegant form of suffering. When you love someone who cannot meet you, your soul begins to bend around their absence. You mistake the ache for devotion. You tell yourself that your patience is proof of love. But love isn't patient when it keeps you in pain. Love doesn't test your limits just to see how far you'll go. The hardest part of awakening is realizing that your pain has become a ritual, that you've been kneeling at the altar of someone else's healing, praying for a redemption that was never yours to give. You mistake your exhaustion for commitment, your emptiness for depth. But healing doesn't come from martyrdom. It comes from surrender. To stop trying to fix them doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you finally understand that their darkness isn't your home. It means you can look at them, with all their pain, all their chaos, and say, I see you, but I can't save you. That's not abandonment. That's truth. And truth is the most compassionate thing you can offer, both to them and to yourself. When you step out of the role of the Redeemer, something miraculous happens. You meet yourself again, the self that existed before the rescuing began, the one who was never meant to carry anyone else's healing. You start to see that the love you were trying to give away was the love you needed to direct inward. And in that quiet realization, the martyr finally rests. The Redeemer finally lets go. And for the first time, you understand. You were never meant to be someone's salvation. You were meant to be your own awakening. There comes a moment when everything you've learned about love collides with what your body still believes. You understand the theory. You know why you're drawn to chaos. You've read about trauma bonds and emotional addiction. But none of it stops the craving. The craving doesn't live in the mind. It lives in the pulse. It's the ache that returns at 2 a.m. when you tell yourself you're fine but still check your phone, hoping for a message that will make the silence go away. It's not logical. It's chemical. When someone loves you one day and withdraws the next, your brain learns to chase. The uncertainty becomes intoxicating. That unpredictability, the push, the pull, feeds the same part of you that hungers for survival. You start mistaking anxiety for excitement, relief for love. Each time they disappear and come back, it's like a hit of dopamine, and you think, see, they still care. But what you're feeling isn't love returning. It's the brain rewarding you for surviving pain. It's cruel how biology conspires with memory. Your body confuses chaos for connection because that's what it was trained to recognize. It learned that attention comes after tension, that affection must be earned, that comfort is fleeting. So when someone treats you gently, without drama, it feels off. Your mind says, this is healthy, but your body whispers, this is wrong, because to your nervous system, peace feels like absence. Stability feels like danger. I used to think I was broken for feeling that way, but now I see it differently. It's not brokenness, it's conditioning. Your body simply learned to adapt to emotional starvation. It's been running on crumbs, mistaking them for feasts. That's why leaving toxic love feels like withdrawal, because it is. The absence of chaos feels unbearable, not because you miss the person, but because your system misses the high. It misses the rush of trying to win back what was never truly lost, only withheld. You see, the cruelest part isn't that toxic relationships hurt. It's that they make you question your reality. One moment you're loved, the next you're invisible. One day you're their everything, the next you're too much. And you keep trying to decode it, what you said wrong, what you could have done differently, as if love were a puzzle you just haven't solved yet. But it's not a puzzle. It's a trap built on unpredictability, and your brain has learned to confuse inconsistency with depth. When I read about the psychology of intermittent reinforcement, it finally clicked. It's the same principle that makes people addicted to slot machines. The reward comes just enough to keep you playing. You lose 100 times, but that one win makes you forget all the pain. That's what these relationships do. They give you just enough affection to keep you hooked, to make you believe that maybe this time it'll stay. And even when it doesn't, the hope is enough to keep you trying. But here's the truth. Love isn't supposed to feel like survival. It's not supposed to make you anxious, small, or desperate for scraps of tenderness. Love isn't a storm you endure. It's the calm that follows after. It's steady, not dramatic, quiet, not dull. Love doesn't demand that you bleed to prove it's real. It doesn't come and go like punishment and reward. Still, it's hard to accept that when your entire being is wired otherwise. That's why breaking free from these cycles isn't just a mental act. It's biological, emotional, spiritual. It takes time. Your brain must relearn what safety feels like. Your heart must learn to trust stillness again. You have to teach your body that peace isn't the same as emptiness. That love can exist without the high, without the pain, without the test. There's a moment in healing, maybe you felt it, when you start missing the chaos. Not because you want it back, but because it felt familiar. The silence feels too quiet, the days too slow, the absence too heavy. But that's not loneliness, that's detox. That's your system recalibrating after years of overstimulation. The peace you crave will come. But first, you have to endure the quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like loss, but is actually the beginning of freedom. And maybe that's what makes healing so terrifying. It doesn't feel like liberation at first. It feels like emptiness. You grieve not just the person, but the version of yourself who needed them. You grieve the thrill, the drama, the meaning you attach to the pain. But as the noise fades, something softer takes its place. It's unfamiliar, almost fragile, but it's real. It's you, slowly learning that love doesn't have to hurt to be felt. The hardest part is forgiving yourself for going back, for ignoring the red flags, for mistaking manipulation for care, for calling pain by another name. But you weren't weak. You were conditioned. You were searching for something you didn't know you already had the power to give yourself. Safety, presence, tenderness. You just didn't know yet that you could be your own calm after the storm. And once you begin to taste that, the kind of peace that isn't followed by panic, you'll understand why chaos no longer feels like love. You'll start craving stability, kindness, gentleness. You'll stop chasing the high and start choosing the quiet. Because love, when it's real, doesn't leave you breathless. It helps you breathe again. At some point, the story shifts. You stop asking why they did what they did, and you start asking why you stayed. That's when things get harder, because the blame no longer has anywhere to go. It circles back to you, not as guilt, but as truth. You start realizing that maybe the person you've been trying to rescue isn't them, it's you. And that realization hurts in a quiet, sobering way. When you finally begin to see, really see, you notice how much of yourself you gave away piece by piece, hoping it would make someone stay. You remember all the times you softened your voice, swallowed your feelings, accepted less, and called it patience. You remember how you once mistook exhaustion for devotion, and then you see it, the pattern, the repetition, the same emotional script wearing different faces. That's the mirror moment. It's the beginning of real awareness, and it doesn't come gently. It's strange how clear everything becomes once you stop romanticizing the pain. You start to recognize the difference between being loved and being needed, between being chosen and being used. You realize that what you called chemistry was often just anxiety, and what you called fate was really repetition. They weren't your soulmate, they were your mirror, reflecting the parts of you that still hurt. There's something both heartbreaking and beautiful about that, because the moment you see it, you can no longer unsee it. The mirror doesn't just show you the other person, it shows you yourself. The parts you abandoned, the needs you buried, the boundaries you forgot how to draw. It shows you that the longing wasn't for them, it was for wholeness, for the version of you that could finally look at love without confusing it with pain. I remember sitting alone one night, staring at a message I never sent. It said everything I'd ever wanted to say, the truth, raw and unfiltered. But I didn't send it, not because I was afraid of their reaction, but because I realized it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for me. It was my own heart trying to speak back to me, saying, "Enough, you don't have to keep proving your worth." And for the first time, I listened. That's when I understood what Jung meant by the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves that we keep meeting through others. The shadow isn't evil, it's just the pain we've denied for too long, and the people who hurt us, the ones we can't seem to forget, are often the ones who awaken it. They drag it into the light, not out of cruelty, but because our souls are ready to face it. The shadow doesn't disappear when you acknowledge it. It integrates. You stop running from it. You stop seeking it in others. You start listening to what it has to say. The anger, the grief, the loneliness. You realize that every time you fell for someone who couldn't love you back, it was that same wounded voice inside saying, "Maybe this time I'll be enough." But enough for whom? For them? Or for the version of you that still believed love had to be earned? The truth is, most of us are just trying to rewrite an old story. We keep searching for the ending we never got. The apology, the reassurance, the unconditional love. We keep chasing it through new faces, new heartbreaks, new beginnings. But healing doesn't happen through repetition. It happens through recognition. It happens the moment you stop looking outward for closure and start creating it within. And when that happens, when you finally face yourself, something softens. You stop being angry at them. You stop seeing them as the villain in your story, because in some twisted way, they played their part perfectly. They were the catalyst. They made you look. They made you see. Without their chaos, you might never have met your own truth. That doesn't mean what they did was right. It means you've reclaimed the power to define what happens next. Because now, when you look in the mirror, you see more than pain. You see the survivor behind it. You see someone learning to love themselves without condition. Someone who doesn't need chaos to feel alive anymore. And maybe that's the real gift of all this. Not closure, not revenge, not justice, but awareness. Awareness that you are both the wound and the healer, both the darkness and the light. And once you accept that, Once you stop rejecting the parts of yourself you used to hide, you finally understand what love was supposed to feel like all along. Not a rescue, not a test, but a quiet recognition of your own worth. It's in that moment when you stop running that peace begins to whisper. And though it feels unfamiliar at first, you start to realize this is what coming home to yourself sounds like. There's a kind of silence that follows awareness. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that echoes. It's the pause between knowing and changing. You understand the truth now, but your heart hasn't caught up yet. You see the pattern, but part of you still wants to go back. That's the hardest part, the in-between. The space where clarity hurts more than ignorance ever did. You'd think once you understood the cycle, it would be easy to break it. But awareness doesn't erase addiction. It only removes the illusion. You still wake up thinking about them, still replay conversations, still wonder if maybe you exaggerated how bad it was. That's your mind trying to protect the pain, not because it wants to suffer, but because suffering feels familiar. It's what your nervous system calls home. And leaving home, even a broken one, takes courage. You begin to realize that healing isn't an epiphany. It's a discipline. It's not the grand decision to move on. It's the 1,000 small decisions you make afterward. Not texting them when you want to, not checking their social media, not answering when they reach out just to see how you're doing. Each no feels like a small death, but each one also breathes life into something new. Your self-respect. There's a strange grief in choosing yourself. You mourn the dream of who you thought you could be together. You grieve the fantasy more than the person. And when that grief hits, it feels unbearable. You want to reach out, not because you love them anymore, but because you want to stop feeling alone. But that's the trap. The loneliness isn't a void they can fill. It's a space being cleared for you to finally meet yourself. People don't talk about how quiet healing is, how unspectacular. There's no dramatic music, no closure speech. Just you, sitting in your own company, trying not to mistake stillness for emptiness. You begin to notice the little things, how the air feels softer when you're not tense all the time, how you start sleeping through the night, how peace feels awkward at first, like an unfamiliar guest. And then there's the moment when you see them again, maybe in a memory, maybe in real life, and your body doesn't react the same way. There's no rush, no collapse, no trembling ache, just calm. You don't hate them, you don't want them, you just understand. They were never the lesson, they were the trigger that pointed you toward it. That realization feels like freedom, but also like loss, because a chapter of your identity ends there. The one who loved through pain. You start noticing how the world around you changes, not because it actually does, but because you're looking at it with new eyes. The silence that used to terrify you now feels like safety. The calm that once felt dull now feels like home. You find yourself craving honesty instead of intensity, consistency instead of adrenaline. And though it feels simple, it's revolutionary, because for the first time, love doesn't feel like chaos. But don't think the pain disappears overnight. It lingers in traces, in songs, in smells, in dreams. Sometimes out of nowhere, you'll feel that old ache like a phantom limb. You'll wonder if you're really healing or just hiding. But healing isn't linear, it's cyclical. Every return of pain is another layer peeling away, another opportunity to choose differently. You'll learn that choosing peace isn't always satisfying. It doesn't give you the rush that chaos did. It's quiet, it's steady, and at first it might even feel boring, but that boredom is just the absence of drama, the absence of self-betrayal. It's space, and in that space, you begin to build, slowly, patiently. You start finding beauty in the smallest things. Your morning routine, the way sunlight moves through your window, the way your own laughter feels softer now. That's how healing sneaks in, not as fireworks, but as tiny signs of life returning. And one day you'll catch yourself thinking about them, and instead of pain, you'll feel gratitude, not for what they did, but for what you learned. You'll realize that the ending you feared was really an opening, that what felt like destruction was actually the foundation of something real, your relationship with yourself. Because healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering who you were before you learned to beg for love. It's about coming home to that version of you, the one who didn't know heartbreak, the one who still believed peace was possible. And maybe, for the first time in your life, you'll stop surviving love and start living it. Healing never looks like you think it will. It doesn't arrive wrapped in clarity or strength. It comes disguised as exhaustion. You wake up one day and realize you're too tired to chase anyone anymore, too tired to analyze mixed signals, to rewrite someone else's story in your head. That's when real healing begins. Not when you feel powerful, but when you finally stop fighting what's already gone. There's something humbling about that kind of surrender. You stop waiting for closure, stop hoping for an apology, stop expecting them to understand the damage they caused. You understand that some people will never see you the way you saw them. And you make peace with it, not because it's fair, but because holding on has become heavier than the pain itself. At first, it feels empty, that space where chaos used to be. You start to miss the noise, the drama, the adrenaline of the highs and lows. Your mind tries to trick you. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you overreacted. But then you remember. You remember the nights you cried silently so no one would hear. The mornings you woke up anxious, wondering which version of them you'd get that day. The way you started doubting your own worth just to keep their love. And you know, going back isn't love, it's self-abandonment. That's when you begin to understand what self-respect really means. It's not pride, it's not anger, it's quiet. It's looking at the phone, lighting up and not answering. It's walking away from half-love even when your heart begs you to stay. It's saying, I deserve peace, and meaning it. Even when your voice shakes, it's building a life that doesn't depend on being chosen by anyone but yourself. You learn that love isn't supposed to feel like waiting for permission to exist. Love doesn't ask you to shrink, to tolerate disrespect, to translate silence into meaning. It doesn't keep you guessing whether you matter. Love is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. It's mutual presence, not survival disguised as devotion. The healing deepens when you start choosing peace, even though it feels foreign. You start creating new patterns, small ones at first. You spend time alone, not out of loneliness, but to learn how to be with yourself again. You rediscover your own rhythms, what makes you laugh, what gives you calm, what kind of silence feels nourishing instead of heavy. You start trusting your intuition again, the same intuition you once silenced to keep someone else comfortable. There's power in that, quiet power. You no longer crave to be understood by the one who hurt you. You crave to understand yourself. You start noticing how your energy shifts around people, who drains you, who grounds you. You begin saying no, not out of defiance, but out of respect for your own limits. You learn that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors, ones you finally have the right to lock. The world starts to expand when you stop revolving around someone who never saw your orbit. You realize how much life you missed while being consumed by pain. The books unread, the sunsets unnoticed, the friends you pulled away from. Slowly, you return to those things. Slowly, you return to yourself. And somewhere in that stillness, a new kind of love starts forming, one that doesn't demand anything from you. It comes quietly, like a whisper. You might not even recognize it at first because it feels so gentle. It doesn't make your heart race, it makes it steady. It doesn't make you lose yourself. It helps you find your way home. When that happens, you understand something you couldn't before. The person who hurt you didn't ruin love for you. They just showed you what love is not. They taught you the limits of your endurance, the price of your silence, the danger of confusing pain with connection. And for that, strangely, you feel gratitude. Because without that lesson, you wouldn't have discovered the sacred act of choosing yourself. So you start loving differently, slower, wiser, softer. You no longer chase intensity. You choose reciprocity. You no longer fall into people. You meet them halfway. And the greatest thing of all, you stop mistaking loneliness for a lack of love. You start realizing that being alone is not the absence of love, but the space where it begins. One day, maybe sooner than you expect, you'll wake up and realize that the ache is gone. The silence that once haunted you now feels like peace. You'll think of them not with longing or anger, but with quiet understanding. They were a chapter, not your story, a teacher, not your truth, and in that moment, you'll finally feel it. Not the rush of falling, not the sting of leaving, but the steady, grounded warmth of freedom. The kind of freedom that comes when you stop waiting for someone else to save you and realize you've been your own rescue all along. Healing doesn't end in triumph. It ends in truth. The kind that doesn't sparkle, but settles. You stop chasing grand epiphanies and start honoring the small, steady moments of peace that come after the storm. The world doesn't suddenly look brighter. It just becomes clearer, softer, more honest. And for the first time, so do you. You begin to notice that life has texture again. The way morning light hits your walls, the sound of rain against the window, the quiet warmth of your own company. You start seeing beauty in ordinary things because you're finally present enough to notice them. Pain taught you how to look inward, but peace teaches you how to look around. You're not waiting anymore. Not for a message, not for redemption, not for the right person to make sense of your story. The waiting is over. You're here. Sometimes, though, the echoes return. You hear a song or see a familiar face, and for a second, your chest tightens. But this time, you breathe through it. You don't try to suppress it or analyze it. You just let it pass, like wind through an open window. That's when you realize healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it without letting it define you. There's something sacred about that realization. You no longer crave to rewrite what happened. You just understand why it had to. Because the truth is, without the pain, you wouldn't have met this version of yourself. The one who no longer confuses love with struggle, who no longer bargains for affection, who no longer mistakes intensity for connection. You used to call that kind of love deep. Now you see it was just loud. Real love is quiet, not because it lacks passion, but because it doesn't need chaos to prove it exists. You start living differently. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't listen. You stop accepting half-truths and calling them understanding. You stop making excuses for behavior that hurts you. It's not bitterness, it's clarity. You realize that your peace is not a luxury, it's a boundary. That respect is not something you earn through endurance. It's something you expect by default. And then one day, without realizing it, you forgive them. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. You forgive yourself too, for staying, for hoping, for not knowing better. You understand now that healing isn't linear, that strength doesn't mean never looking back. Sometimes it means looking back without flinching. It means seeing everything exactly as it was and still choosing to love yourself through it. You begin to find new meaning in connection, not as escape, but as expansion. You learn that intimacy isn't about merging with someone until you disappear, but about standing beside them without losing your shape. You start drawing people into your life who mirror your growth instead of your wounds. Conversations feel lighter. Love feels safer. You no longer need to earn it. You simply receive it. And maybe that's the quiet miracle, realizing that after everything, your heart is still capable of softness. It still wants to love, but now it does so without losing itself. It's no longer desperate, it's discerning. It knows the difference between being chosen and being consumed. When I look at you now, when I think of how far you've come, I want to tell you something simple. You didn't heal by finding someone new. You healed by finding yourself, the one you kept abandoning every time you tried to fix someone else, the one who waited patiently beneath all that pain, whispering, "I'm still here." And now you are, still here, still breathing, still open to life, but on your own terms this time, no longer driven by fear or scarcity, no longer mistaking survival for love. You've come full circle, not back to who you were, but to who you were always meant to be, whole, aware, awake. And maybe that's what love really is. Not a story about two people finding each other, but one soul finally finding itself.